Hello everyone, welcome to the SAID lecture series. I'm Chelsea Rock, I'm an MArch thesis student. If everyone could please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent, that would be greatly appreciated. As a founding partner of Hanrahan Meyers Architects, HMA, Victoria Meyers has been the principal designer on a number of award-winning projects, including Digital Water Eye Pavilion, Juan Buddhist Retreat, Infinity Chapel, White Space, and the Pratt Pavilion, which have all won numerous awards. Ms. Meyers' projects include public institutional buildings, urban master plans, and residential projects. She is currently overseeing the firm's Digital Water Eye Pavilion in construction by Ground Zero and headed for LEED Platinum certification. In 2009, Ms. Meyers was one of the 10 women architects featured in Build Blog's Women Making an Impact. In 2012, HMA's work was recognized with 4 design awards, including an Award of Excellence for the Juan Buddhist Retreat. In 2010, her firm won the Urban Land Institute Heritage Award for HMA's master plan design for Battery Park City's North neighborhood. In 2006, Ms. Meyers published Designing with Light, cataloging HMA's research into natural light. She has a leading role in bringing green practices to HMA through post-professional research. She was a featured lecturer at the Sustainable Cities Design Symposia in Washington, D.C. and Boston in 2009. She currently has a book in development entitled Shape of Sound. Last year, she received her LEED Green Associate credential from the Green Building Certification Institute. Ms. Meyers received her MArch from Harvard and an AB in Art History and Civil Engineering from Lafayette College. We are very happy to have her with us this year as a visiting professor, so let's welcome our guest, Victoria Meyers.
Can we lights on? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for having me here this semester. It's been a thrill. Particularly, I want to give a shout out to William Williams, to your dean, Robert Probst, because I understand they were pretty instrumental in my coming here. And also a shout out to my students who I notice they're here tonight. They've been great, and I've noted that your school has some very good people. The students are great, and I'm really enjoying my time here. So I thought I would talk about change tonight, and change related to robots, energy, and weather, which brings me to the topic of urban design. I've noticed a phenomenon that urban design and landscape design have taken over the conversation in the field of architecture, and that buildings have been eclipsed as the most interesting topic. And these two topics have usurped the primary position of architecture and building, and they've become the most provocative part of design. Today, urban design and planning are seen as interesting. They're even the sexy part of the design discussion. Why? Globalization, global warming, social networks, the internet, Google Earth. The world is changing, and our lives have become robotic and interconnected by the internet. And the structural change in communication caused by these forces has altered the way that we see and evaluate our buildings and our cities. I'm showing George Dyson, the science historian. He's convinced that robots are taking over. According to Dyson, the robotic entity which is leading the charge with change, for now at least, is Google, which is replicating itself faster than we can keep track. And if you want information about George Dyson's ideas, I would ask you to look at his latest book, Turing's Cathedral. He documents the development and the construction of the world's first computer, ENIAC, at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, New Jersey. And it unleashed a power that its makers felt would exceed that of the atomic bomb, and I think that's true. And we are all beginning to live with the consequences of that invention. I think people are overwhelmed with the direction that the machines are taking us. Change is increasing in speed daily as machines interconnect and speed the process of change. As a result, a vast data mining process has begun to take over the conversation in design. It's reduced the scale of our planet to something which is a lot smaller than it used to be. My firm HMA, Hanrahan Meyers Architects, has changed our approach to architecture as a result of the dynamic that I'm talking about, from looking at single buildings to looking at urban landscapes. I'm showing Google Earth, and that little red dot down at the bottom of the map of Manhattan is the north neighborhood of Battery Park City. And next to that, I'm showing diagrams of food urbanism and ecological urbanism. During this talk, I'm going to present data streams from these movements and talk about how they relate to the projects that we've been working on. Social networks, I think, are part of the change that we're all experiencing. The web, Google Earth, they're all interrelated systems and processes, and the data streams from these popular search topics are driving research in architecture and urban design. And I think that we're beginning to see that as I go through the thesis projects with students here at UC. A project that HMA has produced in response to these changes is Battery Park City's North Neighborhood Master Plan, which we refer to as woven fabric. This is a project that we designed in conversation with the clients to consciously change the way that we conceive parks in the city of New York from being part of a grid to being a woven fabric that moved through space. We also looked at the effect of renewable energy resources on design at Battery Park City. We decided to design the North Neighborhood as a sustainable energy network. And the decision was taken early on that we would apply every known sustainable technology that was in existence to every building, every park, and every sidewalk that we put into the neighborhood. I'm showing a map of Manhattan that shows all of the green spaces in the parks, and the little red dot is the North Neighborhood. And next to that, I'm showing a diagram of Battery Park City, which shows where the green roofs are that we put in the North Neighborhood. And this is a diagram isometric that we drew that shows all of the various green roofs at Battery Park City in relationship to the massing of the buildings next to a parks diagram. And this is a diagram by the Plan NYC people. Bloomberg actually came to Battery Park City and met with us and reviewed with us the various kinds of changes that we were making to parks and other systems, and wanted to apply those same sorts of systems to the city of New York. So you can see that in the diagram, green streets, the kinds of flowing park systems are all part of the Plan NYC. Another part of Plan NYC is to plant 1 million trees in the 5 boroughs of Manhattan, and also to, as I said, bring green streets to New York. This is Battery Park City's North End Avenue, one of our streets, which is a green street. Another change that I see happening in architecture is globalization. I'm showing the Irish Hunger Memorial, which is at Battery Park City's North Neighborhood. This is a project that was built after it was put out. HMA wrote a competition brief. It was put out to artists around the world. Brian Toll won the competition, and his idea was to transplant a piece of the Irish landscape to Manhattan. And then next to that, I'm showing a plan of Dublin. The city planners in Dublin actually came to Battery Park City and met with us to talk to us about the different kinds of green technologies we were applying there to develop their plan for the future of the city of Dublin. So this is what I mean by globalization, this incredible rapid exchange that's happening. If you look at what's happening with green design and you look back at Le Corbusier's towers in the park, I think that there's a new international style that's rising up, and it's coming out of all these green movements. I'm showing a diagram here of crops. I think that landscape and food urbanism are 2 of the major forces in this movement toward green. Weather, I think, is an enormous driver of change. When you look at weather and global warming, it's been really pushing all of these green movements forward. And I think it's being fed by the incredible changes that we're all experiencing related to human occupation, deforestation, and carbon footprint. And next to the weather map, I'm showing a diagram that I made of HMA projects from my firm, where I looked at all the different projects we had been working on and how they had a sort of overlap which related to this concept I'm calling porosity, which is partly how projects are porous one to the other, but also how the projects have a porosity to all of these factors that I'm talking about. Plus, very much like Gail Collins, whenever I give a lecture and I talk about things, I always talk about Vitruvius very much the same way that she brings up Mitt Romney's dog. I always like to weave him into my lectures. Vitruvius talks about the weather in his first book of architecture when he talks about the importance of climate in the siting of a city. So I kind of look around at the country and the world, and I say to myself, really, what would Vitruvius say if he knew the dilemma that we would be in right now, that every major metropolitan area in the world would be under threat caused by poor management of limited world resources, human overpopulation, and massive species extinctions, and just sort of throw up a rhetorical question of where do we go from here? So I guess where we go from here is I'll show you some of my projects from my firm, HMA, Hanrahan Meyers Architects. I'm going to talk about HMA projects with porosity, and that would be Batty Park City Master Plan, Woven Fabric, Pratt Pavilion, Visceral Space, Holly Loft, No Space, DWIP, Porous Edge, One Dharma Center, Absolute Zero, and Pearson Sculpture on in Landscape. So we'll go back to the Batty Park City Master Plan, where we created this woven fabric diagram. And this is really where we started with the client, with this discussion of changing the concept of what a city park is and how it should operate within the city. The way that Batty Park City happened is that when the World Trade Centers were originally constructed in the 60s, there was a lot of earth and debris from the area where they dug up for the foundations of the building. So the city took the decision to take that debris, put it into an area of piers across the street from the World Trade Center towers, and that landfill area became Batty Park City. I'm showing a isometric messing study. I always like to talk about the process that we follow in our projects, especially when I speak at schools of architecture. This is always where we start. We start with isometric massing studies that we draw by hand, and then we watercolor them. And we also start with physical models. And when we pitched to get the job at Batty Park City, there was another architect who was a master plan architect, but he had never made a physical model for the client. And this is how we got this job. We made a model. So I think you should all think about that for your future. This is our green roofs and green landscapes diagram. The red line that you see going through the plan is North End Avenue, which is kind of like the organizational spine of the landscape down there. And as you go down the street from north to south, you go through a series of parks. You start at a dog park at the north end of North End Avenue. Then you come to the ball field terrace, which is a green roof over the building we're doing down there at DWIP. Next to DWIP is a field of green, which is the ball fields. Then across from us is Teardrop Park. South end of North End Avenue is Irish Hunger Memorial. And west of that is the Nelson Rockefeller Park. So this, again, talks about how we looked at it as a weave. It shows some of our park spaces. And here we are looking at North End Avenue as a green street. I've talked quite a bit with students here about green streets. Green streets is very much like LEED. If you design a green street, there's a whole application process that you go through. And if your street is certified as a green street, you actually get a little plaque that goes on your street, just like you do for a LEED certified building. It's an actual sort of designation of a certain level of green qualities, a certain amount of water retention that your street possesses. Parks that we have at Battery Park City, this is Nelson Rockefeller Park. It is the west side of the North neighborhood along the river. The Irish Hunger Memorial, this shows the Irish landscape looking inside the memorial. This is Teardrop Park. This is a park that we collaborated on with Michael van Valkenburg, and the concept was to recreate an original Manhattan landscape by bringing massive rocks to New York City from upstate New York. This is a bird's eye view that gives you a sense of how lush and green it is. This is a drinking fountain. Everything in the park was custom designed. This is another bird's eye view. Another thing that we worked on for Teardrop was, because it's very much of an enclosed park, it has towers all around it, we put 3 heliostats on the roof of one of the buildings so that the heliostats could move through the park, and they're on timers so that every plant gets enough sunlight to stay healthy. This is a bird's eye view of the ball fields and the ball fields terrace. And this is the ball fields terrace. This is actually the green roof of the building that we did, DWIP. It's a series of ramps and staircases and benches that go into the landscape. And this is the view when you're at Battery Park City's North neighborhood on September 11th, when we had the tribute in light across the street. So I'm going to change gears and go from Manhattan to Brooklyn. This is a pavilion that we did at Pratt Institute called Visceral Space. It's a deformed rectangular box that we designed to fit between 2 existing industrial loft buildings, Steuben Hall and Pratt Studios. And it also floats between 2 green spaces, a courtyard that we designed behind the building and the campus in front. And our original proposal was just to place this very simple deformed rectangular cube in the slot between these 2 buildings. And there were various issues that came up in the process. The first issue we faced was one I'm going to call buildings face out, not in. When the Pratt campus was started, the area that you sort of see in the middle of the campus, which is the campus green, didn't exist. There was actually a street that ran through the campus, and there was a trolley on that street. So all the buildings were originally designed to face to the outer streets. And so about 75 years ago, the Pratt family decided to change that to actually make a campus. But they didn't change the way that people entered the buildings at that time. So this was the first step in making that change so that people entered the buildings from the campus side. And this is another part of what we were tasked to do, which was to make a public face, to take these 2 existing loft buildings and knit them together into a single entity, which is called Pratt Design Center. And so this gives you a sense of what that entity looks like with our pavilion sitting in there. The entry ramp and the public stairs was another issue. Before we did our project, the way that students entered into Pratt Studios and Steuben Halls were by going up the stairs of the original loading docks. So it wasn't a really friendly public way of entering the buildings. So we wanted to create a much more gracious public entry into the buildings. Another issue was handicap ramp, which usually is a problem for architects because they're so long. But in this case, we decided that we really wanted that length because we thought, you know, we'll use that really long white concrete ramp to sort of underline our pavilion and help pop it out. And the other thing we wanted to do was to make a really nice public entry. We created this entry where we left the walls that were from the original buildings in their raw state, unfixed, and just left them just as they were, very rough. And this shows, you know, what the entry is like. And next to that, I'm showing a slide of what that same space looked like when we started. It was just the sort of crack between 2 buildings, and then there was a courtyard that was full of debris. We also thought it was important to make a nice public staircase. Pratt Institute is a school that prides itself on being a place for people to study things like industrial design and many of the design arts. So we felt it was important to make a stair that was handmade, that had a sense of tactility. So we made this steel stair that was hand welded and created for the space. We also studied materiality, as we often do with our projects, and we definitely wanted the pavilion to be steel, but we didn't know if we wanted Corten or if we wanted stainless. So we decided at the end of the day to go with the stainless steel. And we also studied one of the other things that we're asking the students to do in thesis, which is precedents. One of the precedents we looked at was this sculpture by Banash Kadishman, suspended at Storm King Arts Center in upstate New York, because we wanted to get that sense of tension that you feel when you're standing under a weighted object. Another precedent that happened after the fact is this piece by Michael Heiser in Los Angeles, his Levitated Mass. And there are, as I said, the other two edges to the space. There's a campus, green on one side, and there's a courtyard on the other. So when you're in the gallery, you're always able to look out and see the campus. And then behind you, there's this courtyard that we designed. This is a perspective rendering of the courtyard. And this shows you what the campus looks like and what our courtyard ended up looking like, to sort of always give you a way of looking at the campus or looking at the courtyard to know where you were in the building. And this is my last slide of Pratt. And just to give a sense of what it's like to stand under that box and look up at the sky, so that you sort of sense this building as a complete object or vessel, which is what we thought was an important thing for Pratt Institute, that you pass beneath this sort of visceral vessel, which had a certain sense of crafting as a kind of a beautiful machine. So I want to switch gears and talk about a residential project. This is actually the only residential project we've done in the past few years. It's Holly Loft. This is a client who we had originally designed the loft for in 1996. It was selected for a show at MoMA called the Unprivate House. And 2 years ago, we demolished the project and we did another renovation of the space. The client felt that he needed to kind of move on, and I kind of agree. It's sort of interesting difference. The original space cost $90 a square foot. It was put together by friends of mine. The new space cost about $800 a square foot. So it was pretty much of a white space. And then I wanted to create these two wood boxes that kind of gave you an orientation so that you entered into the smaller box, which is the elevator lobby. And then across from that was another wood box, which was a study, which for me were kind of like this violin that I'm showing by Robert Lazzarini, who's a New York artist, which is floating on the white wall of a museum. It's kind of becomes like this object that gives a sort of sense of materiality within a wood space. These are sketches that I gave to the client as we were going through the process, just sort of talking to him about how I wanted to have these two boxes. And what you will notice in the photographs is that I don't have great shots of this space, unfortunately, because we didn't want to shoot it when the furniture went in, because the furniture is, quite frankly, horrible. So I apologize, but what I have are shots that show it sort of unfurnished. But this is the living room space, kind of looking back toward the bedrooms. This looks at that entry elevator lobby and another view looking at the lobby. I wanted to kind of crack that space so that you got the sense of the wood from in the living room. As you can see, we put in a whole new concrete floor. And then this is standing in the study, looking back at the elevator. And this is inside the study. The study has all the walls are wood, the ceiling is wood, looking back toward the living room. And then there are also, in addition to the two wood boxes, these three glass boxes, which for me were a little bit like this ice wall by Michael van Valkenburg at Radcliffe, that you would have these three glass boxes that you had to walk through to get from the living space to the bedroom space. And so this is what it looks like when you were in the living room and you look back at the private spaces to go through those glass boxes. And then this is the view that you get in the bedroom looking back at the living space. And for me, the glass boxes were kind of like this anamorphic box. I designed this anamorphic box for this friend of mine, Michael Schumacher, who you'll see later on. Michael is a composer I've collaborated with for about 15 years now. And I feel that Michael's sound pieces are very flattened pieces of music, so that's why I felt this anamorphic cube, which is very flattened, was very appropriate for his music. And next to that is a shot of one of the bathrooms. And this is back in the living room space, looking at the bedroom area, the kitchen, the living room, looking at the study, standing in the master bath, looking at the master bedroom, and in the bedroom, looking toward the living room and the bedroom. And this is in the master bath and in the bedroom. And then this is a shot that I think is very interesting. This is standing in the master bedroom, looking back toward the study, because the door to the study is kind of like the anamorphic box. It has two ways of being. When it's open, it's wood, solid wood, and then when it's shut, it's completely white. So it has two faces and two ways of being. And this is the guest bedroom. So I'm going to change gears again and look at a public building, DWIP, Digital Water Eye Pavilion, which I see as a porous edge. And DWIP is a community center building which was promised to the downtown community when the Battery Park City Authority took over that piece of land they created with the World Trade Center Tower landfill. HMA were hired as a community center project architects in 2005, and the building is just finishing up. It's a 65,000 square foot landscape building with a 500-foot long glass facade, which faces West Street. It's kind of catty-cornered across from the World Trade Center towers. And this is our first digitally interactive building. And we have an app in design that's going to interact with the facade. This is a plan which is level with North End Avenue, where you can be walking down North End Avenue and you can step onto the roof of our building. And then a little bit further down from where you get onto that is the entry into the community center. So the whole roof of the building is this green roof, which is occupiable. The design process, again, and we make a lot of physical models. This is a physical model that we made, and we also make a lot of rendered drawings, partly for our clients, so the clients know what we're doing, and also partly for ourselves. This is what it's like to enter our ball field terrace roof of our building from the ball field, from Teardrop Park. You can see that the materials are this like a blue-green granite on the base of the buildings, which are not ours, these high-rise buildings. And the paving on the ground was bluestone from upstate New York, and then there's a lot of green. So there's a sort of sense of a sort of blue-greenness to the space. And then the roof is also very porous, and it has a lot of stairs and ramps that connect you to all the other parks in the North neighborhood. So from every edge and from the center, you can go down and out from the roof. And there's also benches that you can sit on so you can watch what's going on in the ball fields. View from Warren to the terrace, the north side of the ramp at Warren Street. And the stair up from the south side kind of gives you a little sense of what the glass is like. It has a frit pattern embedded in it, which has a piece by Michael Schumacher. Here's a ramp at Murray Street taking you up to the roof. This is the entry lobby. From the entry lobby, you could look down on the pool. There's an Olympic-sized pool. The community center is going to be run by this group called Asphalt Green, and they're very famous for their swimming program. And in fact, in the recent Olympics, one of the kids from their program actually was one of the medal winners. And again, you can see that we use the same materials in the building, the bluestone and some of the granite, as we use outside. So there's a sense of connectivity between the outside and the inside. This is the lower level plan where you can see the pool room, the gymnasium. There's a fitness center against the glass. There's 2 ballet studios. And this is a stair that connects the upper lobby to a lower lobby. This is a lower level lobby. All the The desks that are in the public realm are faced with bluestone. This is actually the fitness room, looking out through the glass. It now has a lot of fitness equipment in it. This is the pool, the gymnasium, standing in one of the dance studios looking out toward the ball fields. And this is the glass wall. For me, the building really has three main parts. It has the green roof. It has the program that goes on inside itself, which is a community center. And then there's the glass wall. When this is really something that Michael Schumacher and I spent 5 years working on, talking about, and arguing about. And this is kind of where we started, which was, I felt that we had at this building this incredibly long wall. It was 550 feet long. And it was basically just a storefront, a very nice storefront system, but a storefront. So my feeling was that we needed to put something into the wall that was more than just glass and more than just putting a frit so that we protected from the sun. So what I really started with was Marcel Duchamp's large glass, because this is a piece of glass which is just a normal industrial window with a narrative going on inside it. So I said to Michael, look, I want to take one of your pieces. I want you to write a piece about water, and we're going to put your piece in the glass so that it would be like the Duchamp piece, so that people, when they look through the glass, will not just be seeing frit, but they'll be understanding that it's a piece of music. So this shows a sample of the pattern on a piece of plexi actually being tested outside our office. And these are two of Michael's scores early on, and then my transcription of a score onto a glass frit pattern. And then next to that shows the glass actually going up at the site. So we worked with not just Michael, but also we had an IT team and an app developer who worked with us to create this app to make water be something which is playable. Here's Michael at his piano, probably not working on my piece, next to a glass of water. And I guess the question is also why water as the theme of this piece. We felt that it was really, this is sort of the culmination of our work at Battery Park City. We've been working on the landscape at Battery Park for close to 20 years now, and we also spent over 5 years working on this building. And a lot of what we did was about sustainability and sustainable design. And I think that water is a huge issue in the realm of sustainability, so that was why we chose that as the theme of what Michael would write. So this gives you a sense of how the wall looks. And the app is sort of interesting. We had Michael make his piece into buckets of sound pieces. So you can take the app, you can take your phone, and you can shake it, and you can mix up the pieces. And you can also point it at the wall, and you can shake it and push buttons, and you can play with the dot pattern. So I think that sort of digital interactivity is a sort of interesting aspect of where buildings are now and where buildings could be going. And I think that this is something that architects really need to grab hold of, or somebody else will. And this is where I started with Michael. This is the first collaboration that he and I did. It was a piece called Architects Design Music, which was a piece called The Light Score. I wrote this piece called The Light Score, which was performed at the Kitchen Space for Performance and Digital Art in Manhattan. And that's a photo that was published about the performance. And then next to that is a photograph of the performance taking place. And I've always been fascinated by water. This is a piece I designed called the Waterfall Table. This was done because I was contacted by a group called Dune Furniture, and they sponsored a competition for different designers to design pieces of furniture to be featured at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York. I was selected, and so they now produce this furniture, and you can have one of these tables for $16,000 if you want one. And then finally, I wanted to show this diagram. I always encourage my students to make green diagrams of their buildings. This is our green diagram for DWIP, and it shows all the various technologies that we applied here. rainwater recovery, direct reflected light to replace energy-using lamps, heat recovery from our pool, high-efficiency boilers, gray water loop to our cooling tower, displacement ventilation in our pool, gym, and theater, sustainable materials throughout, and we had innovation in pool sanitation with a sand filter system. And as I said earlier, we are on schedule to receive Platinum LEED rating. This is another project which is kind of similar to DWIP in that it's kind of a community center, but it's in a very rural place as opposed to being in the city. And this is a project that I'm going to call Absolute Zero. It's a 700-acre site in Claverack, New York, for the Won Buddhist sect. They wanted to do a meditation retreat. And so I call this Absolute Zero geometry and no space in the landscape because we designed the project to have zero carbon footprint. And the clients came to us. They were from Korea. And the first thing that we did in starting the project was we took a trip with them to Korea to look at precedents. And the building that really shone and stuck out for us as a great precedent were these little, very humble Korean farmhouses, because we thought they had a very beautiful roof form and we liked the way they made a spiral. So that became our prototype for how we made all the residential buildings in the project. And we also looked at other prototypes. We looked at Robert Smithson's spiral jetty and Michael van Valkenburg's tidal pool. And then for the meditation hall, we looked at this precedent, which is David von Schlegel's sculpture at Storm King, which is this floating rectangle in the landscape, because we felt that that made a really good space for meditation in a place of stasis. So we have these very open dynamic spirals, which are juxtaposed to the stasis that you get beneath a rectangular roof. And this is something that I wanted to show. This is a site, which is the starting point of our project. And you probably can't see this, but way, way off in the background of that photograph, there's yellow tape, because I took this photograph on the day when I went up to the site with 3 kids from my office, and we had stakes and yellow tape, and we spent 12 hours putting stakes in the ground where the buildings would be and roping off the perimeter edge of the building envelopes with the yellow tape, which is also something that you'll get to do if you design a building. These are plans. This is the site plan. We wanted to do minimum disturbance to the site, so we kept the existing driveway in. So that road that you see at the top is sort of the rural road that you take to get to the site, and then the driveway through the site is existing, and we just refurbished it a little bit. The site had been a rock quarry for crushed rock, and the quarrying activity took place where we put all the buildings. So this is also a brownfield site that we mitigated. The first thing that you see when you come to the site is you come to the meditation hall, and next to that is the administration building. So they kind of make the gateway into the compound. And then next to, when you're walking through the administration, you'll see that the roof is kind of broken into these fractals as you come to the end of it. So you have this dynamic path to walk to get to the meditation hall. So I made this little diagram also. This shows the administration building, which in a way is like the world. And this is kind of from a conversation we had with the client. And then there's a kind of like a bridge that takes you over to the meditation space, which takes you into the space of the spirit. So this kind of shows those pieces of that porch that you walk on, the kind of cord bridge that takes you into the space of the spirit. This shows the cafeteria that's in the administration building and the 2 buildings at night. The meditation hall at 6 a.m., you can see all the fog out the window and the view back toward the living spaces from the porch. These are diagrams that I drew for the project. I always make these diagrams. I find them very helpful, and I encourage my students to do the same. These really talk about the way in which we thought through the circulation of the buildings. that there would be these two guest residences, 1 and 2, which would be like a broken loop that you could go through. There would be this nature loop where the permanent residents for the monks who lived at the site would be able to walk up to this clearing in the woods to meditate. And the third loop would be from the administration hall to the meditation hall. So you see how these fractal roofs kind of have that sort of juxtaposition to the stasis of the meditation. This is standing at the permanent residence looking back at the meditation hall. And this is the two visiting residents and how they connect. And a dynamic connection through the site pass is a diagram that we made during the design process. This is another diagram that I made, which is of the wood screens that we put on the face of the buildings. This is a diagram where we looked at how there are a lot of trees on the site, and that if you put the trees literally on the buildings, you would have this condition where you would have an infinite bleed of edge. Because by putting the sense of trees on the face of the buildings, they would blend with the landscape. So when you look at the buildings and you look at the landscape at the site, you can kind of see there's a oneness about it. And that will increase over time because these photographs of the buildings were taken right after we finished construction. They're going to turn dark gray, so they'll be very connected to the trees. This shows the residence halls with their screen porches, views of the residence halls and the screens, and looking back toward meditation from the residences, and a view of the residence halls with some of the landscape on the site. This is inside one of the monks' rooms. We made them very simple with materials from the site. And another one of my green diagrams, which show the technologies that we use to make the site really green. We have a whole solar panel field to supply all the electricity for the site. We have 5 geothermal wells, a central biomass boiler. The monks are going to only use trees that have already fallen to create heat. They have solar hot water panels on all the roofs, and we also mitigated the area around the buildings and put in organic soil, so those will become organic meadows. And changing gears again, New York art friend Bruce Pearson is a painter, and we've known each other for a long time. Bruce is part of a group of artists who I have collaborated with and worked with over the years. His paintings all have text in them. I can't read the text ever, even though he's a good friend of mine, but that painting that you see has something written in it, and maybe someone here can see it. But we did a collaboration called Text on in Landscape. And so Bruce sent me a text, which he crafted, which contains real hard won insight, and said, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but he wants to get out of the surface of the painting and into a landscape condition of sculpture. So I said, okay. So I had a mirror core drilled with diamond plate drills, and created this little maquette to create this sculpture that people would walk through, so that you would walk in and be within the text. We're thinking that the sculpture would be about 8 feet high with a sort of baked enamel finish. And this shows the maquette from various locations. We even talked about possibly sliding it so it's actually over water so that he can get this reflection of the text. And for the future, I see this sort of continuation of this notion of landscape merging with buildings. And I also see a continuing push of this porous edge idea that materiality and reality of building is going to be conditioned by new technologies, which are both digital and biological. And I think that architects are going to probably be getting on board with making buildings with skins that are much more interactive. And HMA research, I did write a book in 2006, Designing with Light, and I'm showing the light score here, which is the piece that was performed at the kitchen. I am currently working on a book while I'm here this year called Shape of Sound. I've worked on several buildings over the years which deal with sound as the focus of the design. and I'm going to be cataloging those works in my book. So that's what I have to show you. So thank you all for coming, and please, if you have questions, feel free to ask. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
I wanted to ask about Parsons and how it is that you actually altered the role of the incubators. You were saying that was part of the desire of design.
Well, we changed the front door. Because we sat down with the administration and we did a master plan. Because when the current president who's there took over, the buildings in the campus had not had any work done to them for over 100 years. And they were in this condition where most of the buildings on the campus had to be entered through loading docks. And it was pretty grubby.
I see. So you focused on...
So we made a master plan to point all the entrances to the campus. And then we were also hired to do that pavilion, to knit those two buildings together into a single entity called Pratt Design Center. So it became a 300,000 square foot single building, which is actually the largest design center in the United States. They have graphic design, fashion design, industrial design, and interior design all under one roof. Any other questions? Yes?
What are some examples of buildings that are shaped by sound that you'll cover in your book?
I'm also going to talk about Waveline, which is a building that we did. It was opened in 2007, but we actually started it way before that. But we created a faceted bent roof and had worked on that with Yasuhisa Toyota, who was the acoustical designer for Disney Hall. And then another project I'm going to talk about, which was not built, was Ojai Performance Pavilion, which we designed for Los Angeles Philharmonic, which was this kind of crazy idea of creating this building for bent sound. We also had a wall at the back so that you had the option of not bending the sound. But Yasuhisa was also involved with that project. And there's a number of different collaborations that I've done. Infinity Chapel also dealt with sound. The chapel, it was kind of a funny process because it was such an incredibly difficult project to get done. And the Architectural League of New York had made this date to sort of have this group come through and tour it. And I have to tell you that it was, I don't know how many of you have done buildings, but it was so incredibly stressful doing that project that the night of the opening, because we had just kind of finished, I went there and I completely forgot that we had good acoustics. So I just sort of mechanically went up and started hooking up a mic, and they started yelling, "Don't get the mic." I was like, "Why?" And they finally, the acoustics are so perfect. We want to enjoy hearing your voice without a mic. I was like, really? I was thinking, oh God, I totally forgot. So yeah, it was kind of process. It's also an interesting building in that we have these sort of 5 skylights that walk through. So as you walk through Infinity Chapel, there are these skylights which bring light into a basement Sunday school, beam light up, but they also have operable apertures so that you could actually have people below in the basement. You could have a choir that sang who you could hear above. So a lot of crazy acoustical things. I've also done a lot of research, partly through a woman who unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago, Betty Freeman, who was a major arts patron. There's a famous story about Philip Glass and the little old lady who got in his cab when Philip Glass was driving a cab and gave him money. That was Betty. So she supported just about every major composer in the 20th century who did avant-garde work. She did not like classical music. So. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.